Hey guys, Azralynn here, and I've had a lot of folks ask me about adding additional game modes to Dead by Daylight. Whether it's a casual mode versus a ranked mode, 2 killers versus 6 survivors, or 2 killers versus 8 survivors, or even just a full perkless mode. So in today's video, we're going to talk about my thoughts surrounding additional game modes in Dead by Daylight, and this is a discussion video, so please let me know what you guys think about everything in the comments below. So the question is, should Dead by Daylight add more game modes? And well, my short answer to that is no, I don't think they should. As interesting as some of these game modes sound, it just really does not make sense for Dead by Daylight to implement additional game modes to the game. And I actually think that doing so would hurt the game in the long run. Now when we're talking about these additional game modes, what I mean is a whole another mode that players need to queue up for that is a separate queue from the original game as it is now. There are 2 main reasons why I think adding additional game modes to Dead by Daylight is a bad idea. And the first reason being extended queue times. So let's say in a best case scenario, a new game mode got added and half the player base loves this game mode and half the player base sticks with the original game mode. So let's take a look at the DBD player base on Steam for Dead by Daylight. Now please keep in mind these analytics are not 100% accurate as people have private profiles, and this doesn't account for people who keep their game running when they're not even playing. That said, they do give you a kind of a rough idea of the player base on Steam. And in my experiences, the PlayStation player base seemed to be a bit lower, but I don't have any stats for the PlayStation player base. So on PC for the last 30 days, Dead by Daylight's averaging about 16,500 players. Splitting that player base 50-50 is going to give you about 8,250 players playing each of these game modes. And that's with half the people queuing for one game mode and half the people queuing for the regular game. At the very least, you can probably expect the wait times to double. Having these extended wait times could actually deter people from wanting to play the game. Not just one mode, but both modes in general. Now let's take an even more extreme example where about 75% of the players are playing the base game and only about 25% are playing the new mode. That's still going to be over 4,000 people not queuing for the regular game mode, which could result in estimated queue times being about 25% longer, leaving the other game mode to have a much lower player base of that roughly 4,000 remaining players, experiencing an extremely longer wait time. Now obviously these numbers are just estimates, nothing is concrete, but it does give you a bit of an idea of how splitting the player base in any way will impact the queues, and usually in a negative way. Sure, there can be an argument made that adding more game modes might increase the player base in the game overall, but in my opinion, any players that may be driven back to the game or to the game with the new game modes are eventually going to dwindle off again in the long run and ultimately result in that queuing problem. Perhaps if cross-platform gameplay was added to Dead by Daylight, then the combined player base from PC, Xbox, PS4, and the upcoming Switch would be enough to make additional game modes viable. But until that happens, I just don't think additional game modes are worth the risk. And yes, there is that chance that new game mode could be wildly successful and drive a whole ton of new players to the game, but it's a really big risk that the devs would have to take to make a change like this, since the extended queue times is a very likely outcome of adding them. Additional game modes work great in games that have a huge player base to begin with, but smaller games like Dead by Daylight, it just doesn't make sense to divide the player base even further. Now this isn't to say that I don't want to see different modes added to Dead by Daylight's core game, but anything that they would add would need to be built right into the main game as either additional objectives in the game or like limited time events. But even just doing that could be something that would take away from the core game experience for a lot of players. Take a look at the Moonrise event, for example. In the Moonrise event, it was great to have other objectives to work towards, but myself and a lot of others that I spoke to did not enjoy this event because it brought out the worst in some of the players. So I would definitely like to see new objectives added to the game, but as for what things Dead by Daylight should add into the core game to make it more interesting is yet to be determined because players are never going to 100% agree. And I hope that the developers keep experimenting with different events. Now the next main reason that I don't want to see new game modes added to Dead by Daylight is one simple thing: balance issues. It's hard enough to balance Dead by Daylight in a 1 versus 4 environment through the various ranks 20 to rank 1 while trying to keep Survive with Friends from being OP without making that single player experience too difficult. Balancing an asymmetrical game mode is hard enough as it is. Having additional game modes to try to balance on top of that is just going to be problematic for the developers. Either the developers will need to balance perks or modes or just game mechanics individually from one mode to the next, or things will just stay imbalanced in one mode while feeling more balanced in the other. Now, I'm not saying that Dead by Daylight is a balanced game because I do think there's a lot of room for improvement there, but adding additional modes on top of the current game mode is just a recipe for disaster in terms of balance and resource requirements from the developers. So ultimately, while I feel like different things in Dead by Daylight would be really cool to have, it just doesn't make sense with the size of the player base at the current time, and then with the potential balance issues on top of that. So yeah guys, that's my thoughts on the matter, so I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a wonderful day.